To get started, for those of you who have seen this in a previous one where I had students with me, and hopefully we get some more students, but I'm going to get started so that we can videotape this. I'm going to go over and review the sentence structures. This is a second time I'm doing this. And it's mostly because I just realized, well, I realized while I was working on preparing this morning, that the reason we have the sentence structures on our subjects that need to be covered twice is because students are struggling with two different assignments that have to do with sentence structures. So they're the same skill, but I've added a couple things into my PowerPoint so that this is a slightly different video. And I'm hoping it's going to help students understand this a little bit more. I've added a video, I've added a couple more graphics, and so I'm going to get started to defining items and going over what sentence structures are. First, it's really important to understand what a sentence is. A sentence must have a subject and a predicate. And this is extremely important when we talk about clauses on the next slide, it must complete a thought. So a sentence can be a clause. Well, actually, excuse me. A sentence is a clause, but there are two kinds of clauses. A full sentence, a real sentence, is an independent clause because it has a subject and predicate and it's going to complete a thought. Other clauses are called dependent clauses and they don't do this final element of completing a thought. So you must have those three elements to be a sentence. You must have a subject, a predicate, and a complete thought. Well, now, what's a subject and what's predicate, right? The subject is just that main object. It's the thing, the person, the place sometimes, any kind of noun. It's the object that is doing the action in the sentence. So I need to throw this into present. I just realized I jumped right into recording without having this in present, and we're going to need it in present to watch the video. So again, the subject is your main object doing the action. Now your predicate is just a really fancy word for a verb, but it's really important when you're doing other English courses or when you're in another class and someone might say you've got a weird predicate here or an inappropriate like predicate phrase or it's a verb phrase. It's just a verb. It's the action that's in the sentence. So because of this, I think the action is easier to find. So I always find the action first when we need to figure out what the subject and predicate is. Now, why are we doing this when we are really trying to look at full sentences and the types of sentences? Is that you need to understand what a sentence is to be able to understand the formats that each sentence type can take. So what I always tell my students is that we are going to I'm going to annotate this. I'm hoping I can do this correctly. We're actually going to follow some basic steps. I always, even now, still underline my subject once and my predicate or my verb twice. So you want to always, 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 and I'm just going to do this here, underline your subject once and your predicate twice, just to remind you of that. I also like to find this first because I think it's easier to find the action because there might be several nouns in the sentence. Generally, there's only a couple different actions and they all work together. So it's always easier for me to find the action first and then who is doing that action or what is doing the action second. From there, we're going to look at these examples down here on the bottom, and we're going to practice finding these items. So what we have is the girl with the green dress dances on the stage. So I'm going to ask myself, what is the action? Because there's several objects in here. You have girl, dress, stage. Those are all things, so they're all objects. But we need to figure out which one's the subject, remember, because it's the main object that's doing the action. So we first find our predicate, and we're going to underline that twice. Now I ask myself who or what is doing this action. So who is dancing? The dress isn't dancing, and neither is the stage. Instead, the girl is doing the action. The girl dances. So if we go down here, though, the second one, there's actually two verbs that are the main verbs or the main actions in the sentence. So John ate his breakfast and ran out the door. So two things are happening. There's some eating going on and some running going on. So ate and ran. Who did both of those actions is John. So that is our subject. So that is how you figure out what your subject and predicates are. Now remember, to meet a sentence requirement, it must complete a thought. Both of these sentences, as our examples, complete a thought. So they would be sentences. All right. From there, let's learn a little bit about our clauses. And that did it. I've never used it that way. Okay, let's see if I can figure out how the annotation for the screen isn't going to work for me. Let me erase these annotations real quick, because actually we could probably leave them on there, but that's okay. So let's add, we've got girl is wearing. Nope, that's actually wrong. Okay, I'm gonna go through these as examples. Sorry about that. So I'm gonna leave these here, or get rid of these as well, just to step through this. Okay, so now that we're looking at almost at a complete, or a, there we go. Now that we're looking at a clear screen and a new slide, let's look at what a clause is. Okay, so clauses, they're really important. There's two kinds. There's an independent clause and a dependent clause, and we're going to look at what those two types are. One of them can be a complete sentence, and one of them needs a complete sentence to attach to or to piggyback onto in order to be grammatically correct. So a clause is just a group of words that have a subject and a predicate. So groups of words can have subjects and predicates and either complete a thought, making that an independent, okay, an independent clause, or we can end up having a dependent clause. And this is really important when we're looking at forms of sentences or types of sentences. Understanding what part is the independent sentence and what part might be a dependent clause is going to help you determine certain types of sentences. So one of the things I always like to do is I put brackets around my dependent clauses. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more, but I really like trying to use the same markings across the board so it's consistent and you as a student are able to find them a little bit faster. So again, a subject and a predicate, but a dependent clause cannot stand alone because it is dependent on another clause to make a full idea. But an independent clause will complete a thought. She is a very tall girl. Completely a full sentence. We have a complete thought. But a dependent clause means that we need something else to complete the thought. So let's look down here. I'm going to give you an example, but on the next slide, I want to show you a question, because one of the things I get, or excuse me, a slide. I want to show you a slide because one of the things that I get asked a lot is, how do we decide if it's dependent? Now, you can look at something and go, well, there's a subject predicate. Does that group of sentences or group of words make a complete thought? But there are actually some very special words, and they are called, let's see if I can move this forward real quick. Let me end this. And they're called subordinating conjunctions. All of these words are going to be there. Who is also here, and I'm not sure why it's not on this list, but who should be in here as well. So these are trigger words. I call them trigger words, and what they do is they red flag dependent clauses. Excuse the typo. So if we go backwards and we can practice this, we're going to see that we first have to find our subjects and verbs, because to decide if it's a clause, we need to know if there's a subject and verb. So danced is a verb, is wearing, we'll use that as a verb phrase. Okay, so then we have to ask, well, who danced? The tutu didn't dance, the girl danced. So we're going to do the girl. And then is wearing. It's really easy to say the girl is wearing, but really the girl, who is wearing, who goes with is wearing. Okay? So then let's do the second one as well, which we should be familiar with. John ate and ran. Excuse my crooked line. And who did the eating and running? John did. We did that in the last practice. So now the thing is it a dependent or an independent clause? We need to first decide where the subjects and verbs go. We have one subject and two verbs. We have a subject, a verb, and oh, this should be a verb as well. Okay, so we've got to figure that out. Now, let me remember when I said that who is a trigger word. I'm going to look for my trigger words, those subordinating conjunctions. So having a list of subordinating conjunctions available to you when you're determining types of clauses would be very useful. This who, and remember we bracket that, makes, because it is a this is a relative pronoun, and the relative pronouns as well as subordinating conjunctions indicate that we have a can have a dependent clause. So this bracket, who is wearing? Ooh, I did that wrong. I didn't look at all my words. So who is wearing the green tutu would be correct. So, because that's the whole thing. So we're going to make sure this is marked correctly. So the part in brackets is dependent because we have that relative pronoun, and this whole thing that's in the green brackets is describing the girl. But we could say the girl danced on the stage. That is a independent clause because it's a complete thought and it has a subject here and a predicate there. There is a subject here and a predicate here, but who is wearing the green tutu is not a complete thought. So this would be your dependent clause. Okay? John ate his breakfast and ran out the door. There are no relative pronouns and there are no subordinating conjunctions in here. Therefore, there are no brackets. But we do have a subject and two predicates, and we have a complete thought. So this one is our independent clause. All right, I'm going to clear all of the drawings real quick and move to our next slide. This next slide, I think sometimes it's really nice to not hear me do this, and I really like the video up to about 4 minutes. So watch the video. We're going to watch the video until around the 4-minute mark. They are really great at using the color coordinations in order to show you the difference between dependent and independent clauses. So I'm going to run the video really quick, and we're just watching it to about 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Though, if you have the time, it would be great if you can go find this and just type in Khan Academy and do dependent and independent clauses. The video is really great, and it's only about 7 minutes long.
Hello, grammarians. Hello, Rosie.
Hello, David.
We're going to talk about dependent and independent clauses. Full disclosure, this is a relatively advanced part of grammar, but it is important to understand because mastering dependent and independent clauses and being able to say why a clause is dependent or independent will help you become a better writer, will help you become a stronger writer, and give your sentences vim and vigor and strength. So with all that out of the way, let's start with independent clauses, because an independent clause is basically a sentence. We established previously that all a clause is just a collection of phrases with a subject and a verb. So for example, the sentence, I ate the pineapple, period, is an independent clause. So it's a couple of phrases. So we've got this noun phrase, I, we've got this verb phrase, ate the pineapple, and together that becomes a subject and a verb or a predicate. So Rosie, what is a dependent clause?
So a dependent clause is different from an independent clause in that it can't stand on its own as a sentence. So it includes a subject and a verb, but it can't be its own sentence. And sometimes, it might look like a sentence. It could start with something like a subordinating conjunction, like the word because. For example, because it was delicious.
Okay. And let's be clear here, obviously this is an utterance that people say. If you ask me, why did you eat the pizza? I would respond by saying, because it was delicious. Why do we climb the mountain? Because it is there. I'm not saying that this is not an utterance that is made by native speaking English speakers. It is, of course it is. But you have to be aware that it is a dependent clause and therefore a sentence fragment. And part of natural informal speech is that we do use a lot of sentence fragments. And sentence fragments are not as common in formal writing. You may sometimes use them for effect. But I want you to remember that these videos are about standard American English and a kind of formal version of standard American English. And so we're trying to teach you to distinguish between independent and dependent clauses so that you can use them skillfully in the full knowledge and mastery of your choices. You got to learn your scales before you can improvise.
Right.
Dig? So, because it was delicious, not a sentence. This is a dependent clause because it begins with this subordinating conjunction, because. You could also work in something like although or while, and any of these would make it a dependent clause. Now, if it was just on its own, it was delicious, yeah, of course, that's a sentence. The part that makes it dependent is this subordinating conjunction. You put that onto the front of it, and all of a sudden it needs an independent clause to lean up against. I know this is confusing, so let's take a look at a couple more examples of independent and dependent clauses. So the following are independent clauses. Rosie?
The bear roared. Maureen pointed out the monster. That's not our pet rabbit.
And let's do some dependent clauses, and then you can see that we'll be able to combine them into sentences.
While the salmon flopped, that she saw last night, unless I'm mistaken.
So you can see that these are all clauses, right? We've established that, each one has a subject and a verb. The bear roared, the salmon flopped. But all of these have some kind of, everything in orange has something that's either a subordinating conjunction, like while or unless, or a relative pronoun, like that. So while the salmon flopped, you can see in this context, the bear roared while the salmon flopped, you can kind of understand why this is called a dependent clause. Because by the context of this sentence, while the salmon flopped, something else was going on, right? This is kind of like background information. And it's in fact not necessary for comprehending the first sentence, or the first clause, the independent clause, the bear roared. And if we did combine these, you would realize that The salmon flopped is just background information.
Right.
Right. But we need to know what else is going on for there to be a while.
So the bear roared is a perfectly sensical sentence on its own.
Right.
And while the salmon flopped is providing us with this extra information, the bear is roaring while this salmon flopped.
Okay.
But if we were just to see the sentence.
So I'm hoping what you got from this, and this is the part of the screen I wanted to definitely, or the video I wanted to get to, is this color coding, because I think it's really important to see how this happens. The other thing I want to point out before we move on is that you can actually take while the salmon flopped and put it to the very front of the sentence, and it doesn't change its role. It's still a dependent clause. I could really truly, and I'm going to try to do this the best I can, wondering if I can actually text it because my hand, or type it. You can actually write this sentence: while the salmon flopped, comma. Let me stretch out this text box real quick for you. And I'm going to change the color so that you can actually, let's change, I'm going to just change the color to the pink. So there's a, oh, it's not going to let me do it for more than one piece of text. So there's that part. So while the salmon flopped, comma, we have the bear roared. All right, so what to realize is this. This right here, the bear roared, is still the dependent clause of a complete thought. While the salmon flopped, because of the word while, we need to know more. What's going on while the salmon flopped? Okay, you can flip them around. If you do this, please note this little piece right there, the comma. The dependent clause that starts a sentence needs to have a comma after it. Okay, we can flip all of these, maybe except for this middle one, that she saw last night. We would have to tweak this a little bit more and change some words, the second sentence, in order to change it around. The third one, we could literally say, unless I'm mistaken, comma, that's not our pet rabbit. Okay, so that's the lovely thing about dependent clauses, is sometimes they can be moved around, and when you can move a dependent clause successfully, you can actually alter the flow of your own writing. And this is where understanding sentence types is going to be very useful. It's not just about marking up a page for grammar. It's about using these ideas to improve your own writing. And one of the ways to, or one of the hallmarks of good writing is fluency and how well it flows. But sentence structures that sound the same really get to be that da-da, 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 da-da. And the reader kind of just phases out and doesn't really kind of pay that much attention because everything's sounding the same. But if you flip the order of a sentence, it's going to change it up a little bit, and it makes it smoother for your reader to read, and it's better writing. So that is the point and the primary focus of trying to learn what the forms of the sentences are. All right, so we are going to clear all the drawings and exit out of this and move to the next slide. Okay? It didn't get rid of that, so give me just a second. Back in. I really need to get rid of that. So, and it's not letting me. Let me try this. Okay, we got to it. Sorry that's taking so long. I'm trying a new annotation that is working better with my Google slides. So I apologize for the pause there, but let's look at some examples that I want to show you. The first thing I want to do is we need to go back to this slide. So this is a really important slide because I have a way that simplifies, or at least I like to think it simplifies, but that simplifies marking up and understanding and seeing the parts of a sentence. So just like I showed you on the very first slide, where you want to underline your subject once and your predicate twice, you do that all the time. In grammar, when you're looking at anything that has to do with sentence structure, you always want to find your subject and your predicate. So underline them once and then underline your predicate twice. If all you have are underlines, you have a simple sentence. Okay? Now, a compound sentence. All a compound sentence is two sentences put together. And they're glued together by two different things, either a semicolon or a comma and a conjunction. The conjunctions that this works with are what I call fanboys. And that is over here in this pink box. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. And these are really important words to know if you can remember fanboys. I'm hoping a lot of you might have learned this in grade school, but these conjunctions combined with a comma can indicate that there is a compound sentence. And again, a compound sentence is just two words put together, glued together. So we would have to have a subject and a predicate, and then it plus another subject and predicate. And in between those two subject predicate pairs or partnerships, you're going to have one of these items, your semicolon or a conjunction. After that, we have a complex sentence. That is your third type of sentence. And a complex sentence is going to be what I showed you right before the video, where we looked at the example sentences, and it has to have an independent clause plus a dependent clause. So that means you will have a subject and a predicate plus a set of brackets, because remember, we bracket our dependent clauses when we're looking for them. And the other thing to remember is that you can have a major red flag. We want to look for those subordinating conjunctions. And I do have a slide that has a whole bunch of them in there, but it's really easy to Google list of subordinating conjunctions and you will get a lot of them. Okay? So then the final type is just combining a compound sentence with a complex sentence. So that's why it's uniquely named compound complex sentence. So what it does is we have that compound sentence and a dependent clause. If you follow the steps that I'm tell you to do, which is underline your subject and predicate the correct way, and then box a semicolon or your comma in conjunction, and then put brackets around your dependent clauses, when you get to this one, this final one, which the sentences can be complicated, so you want to be able to simplify determining what it is. If you have your underlinings of at least, well, you'll end up with a couple subject predicates, a box, and a bracket, you will have a compound complex sentence. Now, that seems fancy and kind of confusing because you haven't seen it yet. I'm hoping seeing it in action is going to actually help you understand this a little bit more. So here is my steps. Here's the steps that I kind of just quickly went over. We've got, remember, SP is a subject and a predicate. We underline our subjects once and our predicates twice. When we are then also looking for our semicolons or our comma conjunctions, we are going to box those. And then from there, we will put brackets around our dependent clauses. So first things first, loved is our verb. Not to bake. What did Sarah love? She loved to bake. So we have our subject right here, and then our predicate right there. Okay? So then I'm going to do this again. Baked is a I like doing the same skill all at once on all of my sentences. You can go through each sentence one at a time. But baked is our subject, or our predicate. Sarah is our subject. Sarah baked cookies. Okay, that makes sense. But John made soup. So made is another predicate. And we have, that's twice. Sorry about that. John is our subject. Who made the soup? John did. Was is a linking verb. And what was hot? The oven. So that's our subject. Sarah burnt her cookies. So burned is a predicate or verb. Who burned the cookies? That would be Sarah. So we're going to underline that once. And then we're going to have Sarah's cookies were very popular. So we have were is a linking verb. So it's underlined twice. What were popular? That is cookies. So she opened a restaurant where she could, oh, okay. So opened is another predicate. Underline that twice. She is our subject. Underline it once. Because she opened a restaurant where she could sell her cookies. Could sell is a verb. So we got another verb. That's a predicate. So, and who could sell? Sarah, or she. So we have another subject. Okay, I'm going to change colors here. So now we've got our step one done, right? We have this one done. I need to change so we have this one done. So now step two, we're going to box any conjunction or semicolons or comma conjunctions. So I just scan, I don't even have to read the sentence to figure this part out. So I just scan the sentences. Oh, we've got a comma, and I do have one of my fanboys, so comma, but. And then because the oven was too hot, comma, but there's no conjunction there. We've got a comma and a conjunction. That's our so. So we've got our boxes done. So then we want to do brackets. So this is step 3. Remember, our brackets have a red flag word. So I'm going to look for I'm going to get my list out, and I'm going to look for my subordinating conjunctions. Well, here's one. I'm just going to mark it and now I have a subject and a verb. So I've got a subordinating conjunction and a subject and a verb. So because the oven was too hot, that doesn't complete a thought. So I definitely know this is a dependent clause. So I'm going to, that's a crazy wonky bracket. I'm going to bracket this. Okay, let's look here. Sarah's cookies were very popular, so she opened a restaurant. Where is a red flag word? Where she could sell her cookies. Where she could sell her cookies would be subject predicate, but it doesn't complete a thought. So yet again, we have a set of brackets. Okay, so if you can remember, if we look up here at this little list, and I highly recommend that you take this down as notes, okay? So if it's just underlined, we have a simple sentence. So there's no boxes or brackets in here. That is an S. So we have underlines, and then we either have a semicolon, well, we have a box, right? So we're going to box our conjunctions and such. So I have a box here. I have a subject and a predicate and another subject predicate. So that is compound, and I'm going to put CD for compound. So I don't have a box here, but I have a bracket. So the thing that only has the brackets is this one. So this would be complex, which is CX. And then, not just because of process of elimination, but we have a box, right? So we have to have a compound sentence, which that up here would be a box. If I could draw a box very well. And then a dependent clause would have brackets on it, right? So we have a box and we have brackets. So that makes this a CD, and I'm sorry about the horrible handwriting, CD, CX. Okay, just lines, lines in a box, lines in a bracket only, and then lines, box, and bracket. Up here, just lines for your simple sentence, lines in a box for the second, or the compound. Complex has the lines plus a bracket, and then compound complex would have all of your lines, your subjects, and your predicates with a box and at least one set of brackets for compound complex. All right, so here are some more examples that I'm going to demonstrate. And I want to demonstrate these, and they are more like the sentences that will be in your activities in your class. Okay, so they are a little bit different because they have a little bit more complexity. Okay, they're a little bit more difficult, which I think will help you improve. Okay, so again, remember your rules. You might want to write these rules down. Step 1, underline your subjects once and your predicate twice. Okay, and then step 2, we're going to, that's step 1. And then step 2, we're going to box anything. And then step 3, we're going to put brackets around our dependent clauses. Okay? All right, so let's start with our underlining. Remember, we underline our subject once and our predicate twice, starting with your predicate because it's easier sometimes to find that verb. Every summer, Jennifer travels to the Amazon rainforest. So we have a verb here of travel. So I underline it twice, ask myself who travels? Jennifer. And to help you, I kind of copied the sentences and pasted them, and I have not done an answer key yet. So I'm going to talk you through how I would figure out what kind of sentence this is. There's no other verb. So if there isn't another verb, there's probably not another subject. Okay. So then the next one, Allison has an important test tomorrow. Well, she has, that's something she does. Okay, and that means Allison is our subject. So there's one. So she is staying home tonight to study. She is staying is a verb phrase. So that is underline once. And then she, going to undo that so you can separate she from the predicate. This is your subject. Because who is staying? She is staying. To study, I think students would get tricked up here, but this is the event she's doing, like is swimming. Swimming isn't a verb. Like he swam across the lake is a verb because he is swimming across the lake, but this is the thing she's going to do. It is a thing when it's an event because events are like the game. It is an event. So we're not going to underline that as a verb. All right, returned is a verb. Who returned? He returned. He returned the game after he noticed a scratch on the disc. We got noticed. That's something someone does. You notice something. And who noticed it? He did. This isn't saying that they're scratching. It's the scratch that's actually on the disc. And if you can put the word the in front of, or and or the in front of a word, and it makes sense, that means it's a noun. That's a little tricky help there too. Okay? When the sun goes down. So goes is a verb. What goes? That would be the sun. Come is a verb. The stars do the coming out. The city lights. Make is a verb. And what make? The lights make. Okay, so I've got all my lines. I did step 1, check. All right, now step 2 is to box. Remember, we're looking, this is going to help us see if we have any compound sentences, but we're going to box our semicolons, if we have any, or our comma and conjunctions. So there's a comma, but no conjunction. Remember, this part you can actually skim for. So I'm looking for commas or a semicolon. There's a comma and so is one of my fanboy conjunctions. There's a comma, but there's no conjunction here. And there's another comma, but is a conjunction. So I'm going to box that. Okay. So we've done step 2 through all of them. Now step 3 is brackets. Remember, to be a bracket, you have to have a subject and predicate. So that's how helping do all your lines will help you, because I'm just going to look where I've got a subject and predicates marked. Then I have to decide what words all make up that phrase or that group of words that all go together, and then to make sure if those group of words complete a thought. So Jennifer travels to the Amazon rainforest. That's what all goes together, and that's a complete thought. So we're not bracketing it because it would be an independent clause, not a dependent clause. He returned the game after he noticed a scratch on the disc. So he returned the game. That's complete. It's a complete. You could say he returned the game after he noticed a scratch on the disc. This is a red flag word right here. After is. So let me change my color format real quick. So that's a red flag word. After he noticed a scratch on the disc. Can I say that by itself? No. Now, if the word after wasn't there, we could. He noticed a scratch on the disc, but that word after is a subordinating conjunction. So use that list. You can copy it down from the slide at the beginning of this. Just review the video, or you can look it up as subordinating conjunction list. So that is a bracket because it doesn't complete a thought. Sun goes down is my next one, set a subject predicate. So we look at the words when the sun goes down. I cannot leave that alone. It's not an independent clause, but it has a subject predicate, so it's a dependent clause. This set, the stars come out, are actually a verb, an actual sentence. So that gets left alone because it's an independent clause. And then the city lights make it difficult. You could leave that alone. So there are no more brackets. Okay, so ironically, I think this goes in the same pattern as the last one, and I was trying to avoid that. But let's do this in purple. Every summer, Jennifer travels to the rainforest. This is a simple sentence because it just has the lines. This has lines in a box, so lines with these should be boxed up here. So we have lines in a box. That makes it compound because it means there are one sentence joined together with a second full sentence. Okay, so then we have the sentence here, and we have a bracket. So just having a bracket means we have a complex sentence. So CX. He returned to the game is independent clause. After he noticed on the disc is the dependent clause. And then here we have lines, we have a box, and we have a bracket. So that makes this CD, that is a D, CX. And I didn't realize they did that when I copied this, it was in the same order, but now you know. So I hope this part has helped you again see that example of how it could work. I'm going to pause a moment to make sure you guys have that all written down if you need to. If you need more time than this, please push pause on the video so that you can make sure you have those notes, because I'm about to clear them all out. Okay, so I think that might be it. That is my last slide. So one of the things I want to go back to is this list, subordinate conjunctions, or you can find them in subordinating conjunctions. The other thing you want to look for, and I'm going to add really quick a text box in here so you can look these up, is look up relative pronouns. Who, that, their, when, no, who, that, where, then. Let's see here, who, that, I think it's there, what, there's only like 7 of them. So we have who, let me stretch this out. I'm gonna, so who, that, where, which, whose, when, and why. So besides the that is in there, all the W words, right? And a lot of these tend to be things that we ask questions of. So these are your relative pronouns, okay? And I hope that these words all on this screen should be written down or go find lists for them, because they're really, 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 really important to finding your dependent clauses. And if you saw in the video, those dependent clauses help you determine if it's a complex or a compound complex sentence. And more importantly, knowing how to manipulate and use your dependent clauses will actually end up making your writing, your personal writing, so much better. I hope this video has helped you understand dependent clauses and independent clauses and your sentence types much better.